Hello and welcome to National 5 Computing Science. This is Lesson 4 of Database Design and Development, and today we'll be learning the different data types and data validation. First off, data types. Every database needs to know the type of data that will be entered into each field. There are many reasons for this, but one is just to make sure that it's valid data. For example, you wouldn't allow someone to type a date into a salary field or a piece of text into a date of birth field, because that's going to mess up what's more important, in my opinion, the sorting and the searching. If you search for the 14th of February, you're not going to type in the words 14th of February. That's not going to find you the right results. And likewise, if you want to sort a salary, you're not going to end up with the 14th of February 2003 in the right order. It's going to mess up the sort order. So this is why you would set the data types for each of these fields in your database management system. There are 5 data types that you need to know at National 5 level. There are many more than just this, and you'll see an example of this in a minute, but these are the 5 you need to know. A text field obviously allows you to store text, but it can also store special characters and numbers as well. It allows you the whole combination. A number field will allow you to store numbers. That includes whole numbers, positive numbers, negative numbers, as well as decimals as seen on screen here. A date field will obviously allow you to store a date, and likewise a time can store a time. You'll see in the next slide that Microsoft Access has its own ideas about dates and times, but we'll speak about that later. And finally, Boolean. Just like in programming, it's true or false. Some database management systems refer to these as yes/no, or maybe a 1 and a 0 to indicate the Boolean, the binary Boolean. So there are the 5 data types. I briefly mentioned Microsoft Access. Microsoft have their own ideas for many things, and databases is one of those things. They store text in a variety of ways, and one of the main ways is short text. When you're storing data in a database and it needs to be a text field, just call it text. Even if you're using Microsoft Access and you choose short text, if it's an exam, call it text. Microsoft agrees on numbers. Numbers are just numbers, but dates and times, they combine the two. They call it a date/time. Once you've set a date/time, you can then tell it whether it is a date or a time, or whether it is both a date and a time. It's very confusing, but you won't be given a database that confuses you. You'll know that it's either a date or a time. And finally, one that I mentioned on the previous slide is Boolean. Microsoft calls it a yes/no. It is a Boolean, true or false, it's the same thing. But when it comes to exams, you must remember text, number, date, time, Boolean. Try not to get confused with Microsoft's special wordings. So that deals with data types. Let's look at validation. To make sure that what's being entered into your database is valid, you would apply data validation. There are 4 types that you need to know. You've got presence check, restricted choice, field length check, and range check. And I guarantee you probably already know all of these, but let's take a look anyway just to make sure. Presence check. This is when you try and skip a field, but you actually have to enter data in there. It's a required field. You'll have seen this before, and you can see in the picture that the first name field has an asterisk next to it, meaning it is required. You cannot leave that blank. That is a presence check. Restricted choice is when you've got, oftentimes it's a drop-down list like you see on screen here. If there is a limited number of options to choose from, give them a restricted choice. There's no point in letting them type stuff in, because that's going to open it up to errors, which is like if they misspell it or if they type something in that you didn't want them to choose. This is going to mess up the sorting and the searching, and you don't want that. Restrict their choice, give them a list. Field length check, I guarantee you've seen this before. When setting a password, it normally has to be a minimum of 6 characters, sometimes a minimum of 8. Sometimes there's a maximum that you need to type in. This is field length, when you're checking that the number of characters they've entered is within a specific range, or sometimes it can be an exact length. And finally, a range check. Imagine your friend asks you to give the latest film a rating between 0 and 10. Well, if you said, it's an 11 out of 10, they'd be like, well, I said between 0 and 10, so that's a 10 if it's the maximum. That's a range check. If someone types a number that's out with the range, the database system in this case would tell them that it's out of range and they must enter a number that is within that range. Range check. So there you have it, data types and validation. Let's move on to the next one.